How's it going? Good. I'm glad PA4 is behind you. So I'll grade your programs over the weekend, and we'll talk about it probably on Tuesday in class. We'll go over it and discuss lessons learned and such. But I got about 80% of student submissions, so that's pretty good. If you didn't turn it in already by 8 o'clock, make sure you turn it in by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I sent you an email if I did not get it. I sent you a Canvas email. If you didn't get an email from me saying that I don't have your submission, you're good. If you did get an email and you don't know how to turn it in, come and talk to me like right after class. All right, so we got one program left, PA5. So let's look at this and then we'll talk about what's involved in making this happen. So PA5 is a group project. That's the first thing. And you can work in groups of, let's say, up to 4 people. But part of what I want you to do for this project is to be prepared to talk about how you broke the work up among the different people in the group. So if you say we're going to work as a group of 10 people, the only way that's going to happen is if you can make a really, really strong case saying, okay, this person is doing these things, that person's doing those things, and so on, and you're doing such an ambitious version of this project that you need to split it among that many people. So whatever size group you're working in, part of your presentation to the class is going to include a discussion of how you broke up the work. So you want to think about that up front, right? And if somebody just wants to join your group because they, they're your friend or something like that, make sure that it makes sense from a planning perspective. Okay. So group project, you can choose your own groups, up to 4 people per group. And you're going to submit through Git, as usual. You're going to make a repo named PA5. And I'd only like 1 submission per group. Okay. If I get multiple submissions, I'll grade whichever one happens to come first alphabetically, probably. So 1 submission per group, but because of that, make absolutely sure that every member's full name is in the comments at the beginning of your main program. Okay, otherwise they don't get credit. So PA5 is going to be a bash script, and it's largely of your own design, and it's going to be graphical in nature. So here's the full 1-page description. So you're basically making a travel reservation system. So imagine somebody's booking a flight on an airline to go somewhere, and you get to a web page, and there's boxes to specify where you're flying from and to and when and so on. That's what you're writing, okay, the graphical front end to this system. And you can do this under Cygwin on a Windows machine or on a local Linux system or possibly on a Mac, okay? But getting the graphics to work is very tricky, and if you don't start this till next week, you won't get it done. Okay, so you really, really want to start like as soon as possible, figuring out how to make the basic graphical component work. And if you haven't got that working by, let's say, Monday or Tuesday, you really need to do something about that. Okay, preferably find me in office hours and bring in your laptop that you're trying to do this on, and we'll figure out how to do the install. But there's a number of steps to make this work, and they're all documented on Canvas, and we'll go through them in a little bit. But if you deviate from those instructions, chances are it will not work, and chances are pretty good that if you then go back and try to follow the instructions, it still won't work, and you'll need to find a way to undo what you did. So it's going to be really important that you view getting the graphic piece working as a significant component of this project, right? Not something that you try to do at the last minute, or when you're rushed or in between classes at the table outside the room or something like that. Plan to spend some time on it. If you get it right, it's really fun to work with. right? And writing a script that makes windows pop up and lets you click with the mouse and stuff is really fun. Okay, it's very satisfying. And it uses a lot of what we've been doing in this course so far, a lot of the things we've learned about Bash and scripting in general. It lets you put those together in ways that make something that looks like, a fairly realistic application. So it can be a really fun project to work on, but not if it's, kind of rushed at the last minute. So definitely plan ahead. So what does the program do? Basically, you run it, it should pop up a dialog box and ask for the traveler's name. Have the person type in their name. And then display a list of cities that you can leave from. And you want to put in at least 7 cities. You can put in as many as you want. They can be real, they can be fictitious. It's totally up to you. Then display a list of cities the traveler can head to. Okay, destinations. Pop up a calendar and ask when they're leaving. Pop a calendar, ask when they're returning. Ask how many bags they want to check. Then show them a summary of this information on the terminal. Okay, all those first steps are happening through graphical interfaces. But then on the terminal that they're running the script from, you can just print out a summary of that information. Or if you want to display it graphically, you can do that. Okay, last piece. You should have a file named res.txt. And you want to search to see if that user's name is already in that file. And if it is, remove their current reservation from that file. And then go ahead and add this new reservation to the file. And the reservation should look like this. It should be a single line, comma separated, with the traveler's name, number of bags, departure date, departure city, arrival date, arrival city. And if you want to make your life easier, you can assume there's no commas in people's names or in cities. So that you don't have to worry about, if the departure city has a comma in it, that would confuse this format. But within those parameters, you can do whatever you want, okay? And there's a lot of room for creativity in here. For example, if you try to come back before you've departed, right? Are you going to allow that or not? So I'm leaving on the 15th and I want to come back on the 10th. Usually you can't do that, so you can decide to catch that and say, if you're not allowed to do that, you can have a time travel option if you want. Totally up to you, okay? Do you want to allow somebody to depart and return to the same city, right? Usually if you're leaving from Portland, you can't make Portland your destination. So if you want to disallow that, how are you going to do that? Are you going to gray that out from the list of arrival cities, or are you going to check for it afterwards, right? And I'm not giving you requirements for these things. I want you to think about it as a group and decide what's reasonable and go ahead with that. And I'm mostly interested in your ability to work with these graphical elements and to tie it into a bash script and manipulate the reservation file appropriately and so on and so forth. So the style, the colors you use, that kind of thing, it's your choice. All right, group details. So we will probably present these in class depending on where we are time-wise. So they're due 2 weeks from today, and then the next Monday is the last week of the quarter. So my hope is that we'll spend part of that week having groups come up and present their projects to the class. And in your presentation, you want to basically show us how your program works. Any features that you put in, show us how those work. Make sure you show us that it updates the reservation file appropriately and so on. And then anything that you did in particular, anything that you thought was particularly tricky or clever, or took a lot of time or a lot of ingenuity to figure out, right? You can talk about whatever you like in the code. And then talk about how the project was divided among the group members also. All right, got the basic idea? Is it really warm in here? Okay. It's not just me. Go with the fan. We are at 77 degrees. All right, so questions about the basic setup of the assignment.
You said we do have to do this with Bash. We can't use something else.
Yeah, what did you have in mind though?
Python. PyQt.
Oh, okay. No, let's do Bash and Zenity. All right, so we're using a package that's available under Bash called Zenity. And I've posted a manual page for it. And Zenity basically, so the command is Zenity and basically takes a number of switches. Depending on what you want it to do, you can display a calendar dialog, a text entry dialog, and so on and so forth. And if you're doing this on your own laptop, depending on your system, your version of Zenity may be different. If you do this in Cygwin, this will be the version of Zenity that you have. But it seemed like there was a lot of different documentation out there, and this documentation seems to be the most accurate. So you can use this from the web page. And we'll talk about how to install Zenity in a few minutes, but let me just start off by showing you some of the things we can do. Now, you cannot do this on the Linux server unless you do some extra stuff. If you have an X Windows server, if you don't know what that means, you probably don't have one. But if you have an X Windows server and you know how to run that, you can run this on the Linux machine. It has Zenity installed, and you can forward your X display to your local machine and do your development on the Linux server as usual. But it's a little slower, right? And it takes some setup. So best suggestion, if you have Linux, do it on Linux. If you have Cygwin, we'll talk about how to do it on Cygwin. Okay, so Zenity, Z-E-N-I-T-Y, and you run it, it says must specify a dialog type, and there's some degree of help available. And Zenity's a classic tool to just play around with, right? I'll give you the basics of it, but really you want to just explore it. And you don't need to write a shell script to play with Zenity. You can do it from the command line and get a good idea of what it's all about. So let's do a really simple Zenity dialog. So I'm just going to say Zenity. And most of these switches take 2 dashes. Okay, a single dash usually means that you're saying, like, you know, ls-l, right, or ls-r. And if you say ls-lrt, it's the same as -l-r-t. So if you want to put an option that has more than one letter to it, you use a double dash. So Zenity --help, for example. So first example we want to play with is Zenity --entry. And if I do that, I get an entry box that pops up. It says add a new entry, it says enter new text, and I can say cancel or OK. And so I'll just say hello, and I'll click OK. And my Zenity command says hello. It also gave me an error message. And these error messages can be kind of annoying. So down here at the bottom of the assignment, I give you a hint for dealing with error messages, which is after your Zenity command, do a 2 greater than space /dev/null. And what is that doing? Well, we know if we type a command and we say greater than file name, it takes the output from that command and it sends it to the file name, right? But it only does that for things that are sent to standard out, things like printf or fputs. These error messages that Zenity creates are on this other output stream that we called standard error. Right? We talked about this, and we said if you do a greater than ampersand, you can send standard out and standard error to a file. If you just want to send standard error, you say 2 greater than, because standard error is output stream number 2. And in this case, the file we're sending to is /dev/null. That's the bit bucket, so the output basically gets discarded. So if I do that same command that I just did, right, it runs the same, but I don't get an error message. And then the command outputs whatever I typed in that box. So let's make some demo code. So this is just a minimal shell script, right, with the bin bash in the top, and then I just run the Zenity command with the entry switch. So if I say demo, pops up my dialog box. I can type something in, and my Zenity command prints out what I typed in. Okay, what I'd really like to do is take this output from Zenity, this thing that says hello again, or I am here, and I don't want to just display it on my terminal, right, because we're going to get a traveler's name this way, and we want to do something with that to put it into a file. So we really want to take the output from this command and stick it into a variable. Do you remember how to do that?
Pipe.
Almost a pipe. Pipe would let us take the output and send it into another command. And we only talked about this once.
By chance, could you do the $sign and then double parentheses and put it inside, or does that only work for existing variables?
Actually, that might work. I've never tried it.
Greater.
So greater will let us take the output and send it into a file. Less than would read standard in from a file. But it was on the same day we talked about those. So we had greater than file, less than file, we had pipes. I'm going to try the $paren in a minute. Remember when we talked about types of quotation marks? Remember backquote command? So if you put a command in back quotes, this basically gets replaced with the output of the command. So if I say something like A equals backquote PWD, A is a variable that's now equal to the result of that PWD command. So let's do this. Name equals backquote, all of that Zenity stuff. And then I'm going to print out a message that says you typed, and I'll type out the value of $name. And that should be whatever the person typed in the entry box. So I can type in ha ha ha, and it says you typed ha ha ha. So it's really easy to pop up a dialog box and then capture what the person typed in and throw it into a variable. And once it's in a variable, we can do whatever we want with it, right? So you could modify your high-low program pretty easily using this or your stick picking game, right? And everywhere that you would say read, number of sticks, you could do number of sticks equals Zenity, blah blah blah, and they could type in a number and hit OK.
Is there a reason why it innately throws an error
Yeah, but I don't really understand the error message, and I never dug into it. So GTDialogMap without a transient parent. This is discouraged. I have no idea what that means.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty straightforward to figure out, and under Cygwin it does not do this for me, but it does on a Linux system. And it's at 10:17 and 13.972 seconds that it happened, so.
That's not what that means?
I think that's what that means.
Okay.
Yeah, 10:24. All right, so this is like a drop-in replacement for read, but it's a little fancier because it's a dialog box, right? But it's not a very useful one because the title bar says add a new entry, and then the prompt says enter new text. And maybe I really want them to enter their name. So we can add more switches. We can say dash dash entry that says I want this to be an entry dialog. But I can also say dash dash text equals enter your name. And now when I run it, the text prompt above the box says enter your name. And I think I can change the title. Or maybe not. I'll figure out how to do that. All right. And you can do other things with this. So we can do entry text equals some initial value that we want to appear in that empty box that the person's going to type into. So we can say entry text equals and put in some initial text, and now when the dialog pops up, it'll show, you know, our message there, and it's already selected, so if you start typing it overwrites it. You've seen this kind of thing a million times, right? So we can do that. We can also do dash dash hide dash text. And now when we type, we get our funny little dots to hide what we're typing. All right, making sense? So there's a lot of Hex help available inside the command itself. And some of this is useful and some of it is just kind of generally confusing. Okay, so you can do dash dash title equals to change the title bar in the message. You can specify a timeout. So timeout equals timeout in seconds. You can specify initial dimensions for the box, but it usually picks dimensions that are reasonable. You can change the label on the OK button and on the cancel button, and so on and so forth. You can make it modal, which means it has focus and you can't take focus away, which is always really annoying, but you can do it. let's add a title, and let's add a 5-second timeout. And when you're writing bash, you can always put in a backslash, and that continues your line onto the next one. So if you want to make it a little easier to read what's going on, you can do something like this. So now if I run demo, the top of it says traveler's name, entry, and enter your name, and it times out after 5 seconds if you want the high pressure reservation system. Alright, so the other thing you want to know is with a dialog box like this, right, how do I know if they hit OK or if they hit cancel, or if they hit the little X in the upper right corner, or if it simply times out? Because their name might be blank and it comes back with an empty line, or they might have actually said OK and it comes back with an empty line. So you can use $? Question mark to check the status of a command. Remember that? So let's print that out. Let's just print out the return value is $? Question mark. So if I just type in something normally, the return value from Zenity is 0. Probably means the person hit the OK button or they hit the Enter key. If I hit cancel, the return value is 1. If I hit the upper X, the return value is also 1. And if it times out, the return value is 5. And it still tells me what was in the box when it timed out, right? But the value of $? Question mark tells you how that dialog exited. Was it the OK? Was it the cancel? Was it the timeout? Alright, still making sense? Alright, so let's look at some other dialogues. So Zenity --info pops up a message that says all updates are complete, and the title says information. So you can change the text on that. So we can say all systems normal. And it pops up a message that says all systems normal. And you can set the title and so on and so forth. And you can put a timeout on it. And you can set the title bar and all the other stuff. So most of these options work across all the different dialogues. So you only have to figure them out once. So if I say Zenity --info --text equals double quote current date colon back quote date, right? These back quotes around dates say execute the date command, take the output that it generates, which will be the current date and time, and plop that in right here. So this looks like Zenity put up an info box with a text equal to current date colon, and it should say 15 November 2019. Alright, so it's just a bash command. It's a C program. It's just a bash command. You can use it like any other bash command. You can put it together with other commands in the usual ways. And these are, you know, regular windows. You can move them around. You can resize them to some degree of satisfaction. And you can say -- no wrap if you don't want it to wrap the text around a small window. All right, so also we've got warning boxes, which are just like info boxes, but they have a warning sign in them. And we've got error boxes with the dreaded red exclamation mark. All right, we've also got calendar dialogues. So Zenity -- calendar. And I'll throw the error away since we want the output here. So -- calendar pops up a calendar dialog. And it's all usual stuff. You can change months, you can change years, and you can pick a date. And then the output of the Zenity command is the date that you clicked on. So month, day, year. And you can hardwire what date you want it to start on. So there it's starting on January 1st, 2020. Making sense? Yeah.
Do you have to do that like in order, day, month, year? You won't have to do like year, month, day?
Same thing, yeah. It doesn't care what order you put any of these in as far as I know.
Okay.
So usually switches are order independent, unless the switch needs to be followed by something particular like GCC-O has to be followed by the file name you want to write.
Okay.
But these things, they can be scrambled up. Doesn't change anything. All right, text info boxes. Zenity -- text info pops up a text view. Okay, it's like a little info box, but it's bigger. And we can put something in here like -- file name equals. Let's just pick in our demo file. Right, so we can read the contents of a file and display it in a text view. And this is read only, right? We can't change it. But if you want to be able to edit it, you can say -- editable. And this will not change the file itself. Okay, it simply reads the file to display this. But if you make changes to this and then you say OK, the Zenity command outputs what the new file would look like. And you can capture this and put it into a file and do what you want with it. But it doesn't change the original. All right, getting ideas how you can use some of these things for your PA5. And Zenity does way more than you actually need for PA5, but it's fun to play with. And you can use it in all sorts of ways. So Zenity -- file selection pops up a file selection dialog. I have no idea what directory it's looking in. I think it's my files directory. And you can pick a file, and it will output the path name of the file that you selected. And you can move around. Right, so this is a really low cost of entry. To do this in Java, we're going to have to do a fair amount of work in addition to learning Java. To do this in C, you have to do a great deal of work. Python's pretty easy, but then you got to be doing Python. But this is really easy in Bash. Once you know a few basic ways that you can embellish the Zenity command, the title, the text, and so on, it lets you do a fair amount of graphical interaction. Now, it's not highly customizable. Right? We can't change the shape of the border or add a drop shadow or put rounded corners or things like that like we could in something like Java. But just to put up some dialogues and interact with the user with a mouse and a keyboard, this is pretty straightforward. So the file selection comes with a bunch of modifiers. You can specify an initial file name. You can allow multiple files to be selected, limit them to selecting directories. You can put in a save mode, and so on and so forth. Right, so I can put in a new file name if I want. So if I go and save and I confirm overwrite and I try to specify a file that already exists, it gives you the usual, are you sure you want to overwrite this file thing? And again, it doesn't do anything, right, except return the name of the file that you selected. And a status. So 0 is normal. If I say cancel and I kick out of here, then it'll be a 1. And so you can use that to know if you should go ahead and do whatever your dialog is intending to do. Okay, notifications are fun. I haven't tried it on this desktop yet. Normally what this does is, you know, that little notification area that you get usually in the upper right corner, it should pop something up in there. And I think I have like notifications hidden or something. Oh, I don't have notifications. Okay. But try it on your machine. You can pop something up in the corner. Okay, this is a fun one, progress bars. So I can say Zenity -- progress, and you get your annoying progress bar. And I can feed numbers to standard in, and it'll update the progress bar status. So we can be like saving your reservation and then, you know, go backwards. And when you get to 100, the bar is full. So that takes some work to interact with, because you need to run Zenity, but you need to be feeding something into it that generates numbers from 0 to 100. And so you probably need to pop this up in a separate process and then send stuff to it through something like a pipe. And we haven't talked about processes enough yet, but we're going to do that next week probably. But if you want a progress bar, you got that option. All right, let me show you one more. So we can make drop-down lists, like names of cities you might want to travel to. So Zenity -- list, and this is a funky format. First, you name your columns. So column equals I don't know, name. Column equals cost. And time. And then you start filling in values for each of those columns. So let's go to Paris. Costs $2,000 and takes 12 hours. And let's go to New York, and it costs $50 and takes 6 hours. And let's go to Portland, and that costs $10,000 and takes 1 hour. All right, and you get a nice dialog box. And I should have made this longer. Alright, so I've got more stuff. I can scroll right on my scroll wheel, or I can grab the scroll bar. And you can select something, and when you say OK, you get back, in this case, the first column. So hopefully in this case your first column would be unique. And if I click on New York, right, the output from Zenity is NY. And you can change which column gets printed. You can say print column equals, normally it's 1, but you could set it to something else. If you had something you were using as your index, you can hide certain columns. So if you want to make an index of just, say, numbers, but not display it, you can use that as your print column. And you can do a radio list. So you get these things with, you know, you get to select it like that. Or you can do a checklist. And in that case, it gives me a pipe separated list of all the first columns that I selected. So, yes?
How do you do the hidden column if you were to...
-- column equals number.
Okay.
And then it just won't show you that column. And you could put like an index in there or something. So yeah, play around with these, right? There's a manual page on Canvas, but once you get Zenity, we didn't talk about installing Zenity. Oh, we got 2 minutes to do this. Okay, we can do this. Okay, this is for Zenity. How many people here are using Sigwin? Okay. So I've got a link you can use to download the program, which is an exe, so you can run it under Windows. Assuming you're using 64-bit Windows, you need to run this as an administrator. I haven't tried this under Windows 10. Follow the instructions, and then here's the tricky part. It'll ask you where you want to install this. It'll be some directory called Zenity. Move that into the bin area of Sigwin, which is usually c:64/bin. Right, move the whole directory that you put Zenity in. And then in your Sigwin's bash RC, you can put in this alias, and then you got to have this export. And it's got to be sigwin64bin/zenity/share. And if that doesn't work, come and talk to me. Bring your laptop, and we'll make it work. But last time I tried this was working fine. But that was an earlier version of Windows 10. And then Zenity-help gets you started with Zenity's own help information. And depending on what you're doing, you can get help on, just the calendar dialog or the file selection and so on and so forth. All right, that should be enough to get you started. So play around with that. I'll get PA5 graded as soon as possible, sometime this weekend. And I will see you next time.